Haleluya, tumshangilie.
Haleluya na asifiwe.
Wenye uhai vimwimbie.
Wenye uhai vimsifu Yesu.
Haleluya, tumshangilie.
Haleluya na asifiwe.
Wenye uhai vimwimbie.
Wenye uhai vimsifu Yesu.
Thanks, and hello, Kyle and Ruthie and syndicatednews.net. We better be quick about this. I know I'll be cut off. It's fairly normal. If I evaporate it, it's just a power problem. Phones go out when the electricity goes off, and it's gone off about 30 times today. Y'all are right in saying the recording for our songs of the Maasai Steppe took place in incredibly poor conditions. There were conditions in which most recording engineers would just refuse to work. It was just plain hard. We didn't have anything like the kind of studio an engineer would use in the West. We ended up doing our recording in an old building in the Flying Medical Service compound. They use it as their warehouse for plane parts and 20 years worth of accumulated assorted junk. Before we could use it, we had to empty it out and clean up that 20 years worth of junk. The good thing is that the walls are lined with egg crates for sound insulation, and that was a real plus. Somebody apparently had some big ideas a long time ago about turning that thing into a television studio, but it didn't work out. They moved on. But it worked out pretty good for us. It gave good sound, and you'll hear it. As I mentioned a little while ago, electricity is always a problem here. So we used a little battery-powered 4-channel field recorder in our studio work. This wasn't perfect, but it was about the only option we had. There wasn't any way we could use a normal studio recorder as engineers in the States would, because you often get power surges here that just blow things up and melt them. Sometimes the power runs pretty high and sometimes it's low. At night in our house, for instance, I usually can't read. Light bulbs just don't glow. But it's unpredictable. It does run high. Sometimes all the vegetables in the refrigerator freeze solid. So batteries really were the only way to go. A field recorder is problematic. We didn't have the ability to play back and overdub, and that was a bigger problem than you'd think. Every time somebody in the choir flubbed something, or some herdsman passed by outside with a herd of cows or goats or donkeys with their bells, we could hear it on the recording, and we had to start the whole song over from scratch. It was a long process, but everybody was pretty good-natured about it. They'd all lived with bad electricity or no electricity for most of their lives, so they understood what was going on. Let me drop back a bit in time, because the history of what happened before we started recording was pretty interesting too. Before we even found the Loruvani Choir, we had some pretty incredible adventures just finding a choir, any choir that wanted to work with us. We took a lot of terrifying drives on donkey paths out to the middle of the wop-wops, and we spent a lot of time talking to tribal elders who wanted to know just what the heck we were up to. And we met some pretty ragtag choirs which wanted to sing dull church hymns, and that wasn't what we were looking for. We wanted the magic of Maasai music. Eventually, we did find the Loruvani Choir through a friend of ours, Hezron Abel, who happened to be the conductor of the choir. Hezron set a time and date to meet, and we did. We were expecting pretty much to meet a ragtag band of people, but 21 of some of the most dignified people I've ever met showed up. And then they all piled into one minivan, and off we went to our makeshift studio. We still didn't really know what to expect musically, though, since we knew that most of the choir had never seen a microphone. And then everybody lined up, and Hezron stood on a chair, set the key, and began waving his arms just like he was a conductor in Carnegie Hall. And the choir began to sing Tum Shangali, and it was spine-tingling. It wasn't anything like what we'd expected, and we knew right then we weren't going to end up with just any old field recording. These folks were pros and well-practiced, and I was so stunned that I flubbed the recording and we had to do it all over again. The first studio experience quite clearly turned out to be worth the painful months we'd spent just trying to find a choir. The whole experience was magical for us, and it still is. Now, what's going to happen if the choir has a hit? They agreed from the start among themselves that they'd spend any money they earned helping each other. I'm not exactly sure what they'll do. Maybe they'll build some more buildings that'll help the community. Maybe they'll do some community service projects. That all remains to be seen. I'm sure, though, that whatever happens, it'll be for the greater good. The important thing to note, though, is that all the people associated with the choir don't want to just sit around. They want to do something. I think that's pretty refreshing, actually. I see a lot of people who just want the donations and they want to sit around on their butts and watch somebody else work. The Loruvani Choir clearly wants to do their own work. They'll take help, just as we will, but they know what they want to accomplish. Now, what's going to happen in the future? We have at least 2 CDs in the works and maybe 3. Depends on how the composers go. 1 CD will be accompanied by drums and some other basic instruments, and that's a pretty big departure for Maasai. Historically, Maasai have not used any instruments. This just goes to show you that the choir is ready to spread its musical wings. In the late spring, the choir is scheduled to head off to a tour of Sweden and Norway. If we're lucky, we'll have at least one of the CDs finished by then. So that's the quick, very abbreviated story. It's uncommon that I've been able to stay on the line for this long, so I better sign off before I get cut off. I hope your listeners will add songs of the Maasai Steppe to their holiday shopping list. If they do, they will be helping some people out. Anyone can pick this album up through syndicatednews.net. I'd better go now. I'm going to get cut off. The lights are flickering. Thanks, Ruthie, Kyle, and syndicatednews.net. Happy holidays from Africa.
Haleluya, tumshangilie.
Haleluya na asifiwe.
Wenye uhai vimwimbie.
Wenye uhai vimsifu Yesu.
Haleluya, tumshangilie.
Haleluya na asifiwe.
Wenye uhai vimwimbie.
Wenye uhai vimsifu Yesu. Fanya watoto wake kila hali na asifiwe. Wenye uhai vimsifu Yesu. Vinono na vinubi, matari na wacheze kwa matoazi ya vumayo. Wenye uhai vimsifu Yesu.
Hata ndege wa makindani
Wanasifu kwa makelele,
vilindini na vilimani,
wasifu kwa sauti tamu.
hata ndege wa makindani
Wanasifu kwa makelele,
vilindini na vilimani,
wasifu kwa sauti tamu. Dia tushangilie, ametufanya watoto wake kila hali na asifiwe. Wenye uhai vimsifu Yesu. Vilindi na vinubi, matari na wacheze kwa matoazi ya vumayo. Wenye uhai vimsifu Yesu.
kwa mashangilio tumsifu,
Kwa mvumo wa baragumu,
wake hauna mwisho,
mtawala mbingu na nchi.
kwa mashangilio tumsifu,
Kwa mvumo